Hey there, everyone. Hope you're having a great day. Dr. Stock here. Hey there, everyone. Dr. Stock here. Hope that you're having a great day walking on this gorgeous day. It's a little bit warm. My sunglasses are currently locked in my car. I forgot to grab my car keys. It's nice to get out of the studio, do a little bit of walking here, step away from the charts just for a little bit of lunch break. And when I checked in with them, things were looking pretty darn good. The SPY is up, tracking the S&P 500. The NASDAQ 100 stocks tracked as QQQ, also doing splendidly. We got nice things from AMD, from Microsoft, Nvidia. Last I looked, bumped up against resistance at 116 when during the after hours trading, it was all the way down to $100 per share following the release of the Microsoft earnings. AMD coming through and talking about their big win. And if you look at AMD stock, it is way up. And the thing is, and this is something I want to talk about with you here for AMD, for the sort of performance that they're getting. They are getting a lot of attention because the hardware services, hardware from Nvidia is so darn hard to get. You listen to Tesla and Elon talk about not being able to get their hands on the parts that they need from Nvidia because there's just so many buyers, which isn't all that great for Tesla, which means they're building out of Dojo and their own hardware through that. Well, if you can't get Nvidia parts, you're not going to build your own stuff like Tesla or Amazon or Microsoft, Meta, Google, you name it. Maybe you're a smaller player in that, where you're not going to build out some of your own hardware in order to compete or to provide the services that you would need for your own business. Well, then after Nvidia is AMD. So that good news that you get for AMD is then wonderful news for Nvidia. And that demand that is still out there, and Microsoft saying that there's continued growth that needs to happen for them on the infrastructure side for AI, and the accelerated growth that they're seeing in demand for the services, the AI-based services as well. This is all just wonderful news. And as I said in my morning video, I think it sets a trajectory for Nvidia to revisit that all-time high of 140. Of course, we have to hear from Meta, we have to hear from Amazon, we have to hear from Apple, and they come out and they talk. And I gotta say, good news for them is probably still good news for AI. We need to hear about the sort of CapEx spending that they're gonna have in AI-related fields, and that's gonna be a lot, very telling for that continued demand for Nvidia. So in terms of technicals, punching through 118 is actually the number that we need to give us room up to 125 to 130. And after we get over 130, we can make that climb up to 140. And we have a trend line resistance that I'll share with you when I get back to my computer, do some more technicals. By the way, I share these technicals over at the Discord available through my Patreon. That link is down in the description. You can also see my buys and sells over there. But yeah, so for Nvidia, we might hit some resistance on the way. We might have some bumps in order to get there to their earnings date. I think that we do see a run up to their earnings date. I think it's very bullish between now and August the 28th. So if you want my Nvidia stock price prediction, we could see that 140 come to pass, possibly even more. Maybe that run up to 150. That's going to be a tough sell. I think 150 is going to be where we find some pretty solid resistance. We would have to have some incredible numbers, because if you remember back to their last earnings, breaking over 1,000 was huge. And so split adjusted basis, that means 100, it then is now that number because of the 10-to-1 stock split that they had. So $100 was a huge thing. Going up to 150 is 50% more market cap than what they had as of their last earnings. As a matter of fact, a little bit more than that prior to the earnings, a little bit less than that afterwards, but still 50% increase to their market cap. So is it a little bit frothy? Yeah, maybe a little bit. However, the more confirmation that we get that the demand for AI products and services continues to accelerate, with that acceleration number in there, it changes the growth metrics that we get, keeps people excited, keeps the market frothy, keeps the juices going. Is 150 for Nvidia stock in the cards? I gotta say, it's not off the table. I think there's better than a 0% chance that we get there. Does it make sense on a multiple basis? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on what kind of growth numbers we see. I project earnings for Nvidia. I share that with my community members. I'll put some out for this coming earnings. So like I said, that'll be available over at the Discord. And I'm always excited for it. And I love doing the projections. And last time that I did that, they essentially skipped a quarter for my projections. So what we were looking at for the Q1 earnings that we got essentially went from Q4 to Q2. Jumped right over my projection for Q1, and the thing is, I wasn't alone in that. It jumped over other people's Q1 projections as well, and that's why we saw such an astronomical takeoff. And so the projected margins that they have, and the fact that they are fat margins, they are huge between the revenue that they take in and the amount of profit that they're able to take away from that. And that's likely not going away for this earnings that we have coming up. It's likely not going to go away for the next earnings after that. Matter of fact, I think we got a green light through the end of the year. We're going to have to watch and see what plays out with that. So if we get some messiness in the markets between now and the election, that can set up an incredible buying opportunity, because that will tank the multiples that stocks are trading at. And as those multiples drop, it de-risks the purchases that you might happen to make. Mind you, none of this financial advice. This is just how I think about the market, and ways that you can also think about the market, and you can factor it into the due diligence that you do for the stocks, ETFs, whatever it is that you happen to buy. So if we get that sort of compression in the markets, if we get that pressed down and we start to hit those critical technical levels, well, what stocks do you run to? Well, I still think that big tech still has some legs on it. We saw a little bit of correction in the market already. Now we're seeing a little bit of a recovery, a little bit of a bounce from that. Did we fully recover? Nope. What we need to look for is the highs that come our way. When we put in a higher high, that's a good thing. When we put in a higher low, that is where we get a confirmation of a bullish thing. So until then, we might find that we're in the beginning of some sort of consolidation pattern. However, as I mentioned with AMD, as I mentioned with Microsoft, this is something that might give us a little bit more of that fervor, a little bit more of a one last hurrah, if you will, prior to any sort of sell-off that we might see leading up to the election. The election happens, we have certainty, markets love certainty, market starts to run. Markets do not like uncertainty. That's part of the FUD thing that people talk about, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So as long as we have that over the election results, well, that's something that can mess with the markets. I think we actually already had that with with what happened with Trump, and then also with who's taking over for Biden. All that uncertainty over that time, on top of the fact that the markets were quite a bit overextended by that point in time, well, then you saw the sell-off that we had. You saw the amount of pain that came with it. So we could sell off leading up to the election. We could trade sideways leading up to the election. But I think that true upward direction that we get, that next push, comes after the election. We're going to have to watch and see what happens for that. So just to summarize for Nvidia, I think we have a path to 140. I don't think that 150 leading up to earnings is out of the question. If we don't see it leading up to earnings and the earnings impress, I think that 150 is really on the table yet. We still might turn around. We still might sell off from those levels. I don't know that they sustain that high. I think that depends on a lot of things. And a lot of it is narrative based for what we have for the markets and for AI, what we have geopolitically. How are they able to handle the China sanctions, for example? That would be something that would be very worthwhile with considering for Nvidia and the way that it's trading. So are they able to skirt around or really work through those sanctions? And are they still able to have that revenue exposure to China, helping to fill out the bottom line? Because China is absolutely a huge part of their revenue base, and without it, that can be then detrimental to Nvidia itself. So that'd be some of that risk that you would have factored in there. So geopolitical risks are always part of that. Economic risks are always part of that. So you're not really going to get that risk-free area in that. So it is something to just keep in mind as you trade on this stuff. I'll wrap things up here, guys, with Nike. Actually, Nike. If you haven't watched my video, I believe it's from Monday. There's a lot of reasons to be excited about Nike over the next 3 to 6 months, even with not necessarily the promise of any sort of business really changing or picking up for them. I do think that they're going to start running leaner, for example. They're also very much sold down. I think that there's actually a 3-to-1 risk-reward ratio right now, where there's a 30% upside for a 10% downside risk. And if we do see that 10% downside, then I think that sets up an incredible buying opportunity. These are my thoughts, by the way. Anything I talk about in here is either just me sharing my thoughts or education for you. None of it is to be taken as financial advice, but Nike, a lot of things going for it, such as share buybacks. They also have a dividend coming up, dividend increase. They've increased their dividend every year for the last 22 years, and I don't think that this September is going to be any sort of exception to that. So that's something to also keep in mind. Like I said, go back and watch that video from Monday, very well detailed. You want to see my buys and sells, the link's down in the description for that. Click on Patreon, head on over to the Discord, check that out, and I think that you'll really enjoy what you see. We'd absolutely love to have you over there as one of the community members. And there's also a link for technical analysis trading course, which includes the bread recipe that Stock Mode developed, and I have a chapter in there on options. Nice, small, easy to digest pieces, very understandably written, and it's really helped out a lot of people. It could likely help you out too. Go ahead and check that out, guys. I'm gonna let you go for now, and thank you very much for watching. I'm Dr. Stock, Doctor of Education, and learning is earning, my friends. See you next video.